What did the rest of the region look like at that time?
At that time, uh, there are different stages, of course. If you look at the northeast, which is Taiwan and Korea, I would say in the early 60s, they were already shifting from uh, import substitution to export orientation.
Mm.
You know, they exported wigs, they exported uh, vegetables, and uh, what I'm saying is that their shift to export orientation, and that is why they had continuous growth,
Yes,
sustained growth,
yes.
uh, was, to my mind, because of that. Whereas in our case, we were a laggard in terms of shifting the structure of our economy. Now, in the case of Malaysia, they are really export oriented.
Mm.
They have the tin
Yeah, palm
and
oil.
palm oil, and their population is relatively low as
Mm.
compared with ours.
Mm.
And at that time, we were growing more than 3% per annum.
Mm.
Uh, well, even though the church was objecting to our population planning programs, we pursued it.
Okay.
Uh, and in the case of Indonesia, well, they were like us also in a way because they did logging, export of
Yeah,
palm oil,
yeah.
but they have oil and we do not have. Uh, and Thailand has a very good agricultural base, and then they found gas in uh, in the bay,
Yes.
and so they were well off. That is why 19 when the OPEC started acting up, uh,
Yes.
95% of our energy source were crude oil,
Yes.
as compared with the others who were exporting and had some uh, petroleum resources. So it was very difficult for us. But in the meantime, in ASEAN, since I was part of the ministerial group for economics, we were first politically, our approach was no fighting among us because it is under peace that we can develop.
What made some of the other countries to be able to move away from import substitution?
Indonesia, of course, stayed long. And in fact, when we were having the preferential trade agreement, they were the ones that were always blocking, lowering tariffs, uh, because we had to listen to them. They are the biggest country, but they were very protective
Mm.
of their industries. But they have a large internal base, uh, so and they could gain efficiency. I think their enterprises also are much larger
Okay.
in terms of scale as compared with the Philippines, which
Yeah.
always they always democratically, I would say, distribute licenses.
Mm. But how democratic is the Philippines today? With some of the um, situations that you are going through at the moment and the changes that need to be.
Well, actually, we have a very expensive democracy because elections now are very expensive. And I'm really concerned about that because it leads to corruption. Uh, if you have an expensive way of electing, then
And also inefficient in a sense.
yes, inefficient. And the our Congress is always delayed in terms of enacting the budget and other essential legislation. So that is something that has to be corrected in order to make the Philippines more competitive.
What is your take on the success of countries like Taiwan and Japan from the time when they were really backwards to today?
Well, in the case of Taiwan, of course, I suppose their single rule for a long, long time became important. Secondly, I suppose the external threat unified uh, the country, and they're very rational in their approach. Uh, Actually, Taiwan is one of my models for development because they develop by encouraging small, medium industry, uh, export oriented, and they shifted from low value crops to high value crops for their agricultural space. Uh, so that is one of my models for the Philippines. In the case of Japan, for example, well, of course, they have even before World War II, their technology is already superior. At that time, you don't have this intellectual property rights. They copied a great deal from Germany, and
Entry barrier was essentially very low.
yes, and they have one language, very nationalistic, and then in a way they were relieved of defense spending by the United States. In their development plan, they really developed modern industries, export-oriented. The region, as far as ASEAN is concerned, the program really was to be a production base for exports, because everybody would like to have exports, and for stabilization of our respective economies. That is why you have a lot of Japanese investments, uh, some US, some UK, in order to enjoy the market of ASEAN, as well as to be able to export to Europe and to
If you had
Japan and the United States.
if you had the chance to correct some things in the time that you were with government, what would you say they are?
The important thing is restructuring of our economy, because that will bring
From a import substitution
yes,
to
a balanced economy, because I don't think we can be so export oriented. Agriculture, uh, which we have to develop also, because there are plenty of people there, and
on the ground.
you can reduce poverty by improving on agricultural productivity. And so that is one. And secondly, I really favor a semi-parliamentary or parliamentary form of government, because I think it is quicker acting and probably less expensive than
Than
our
the
present structure, which is very similar to that of the United States.